Breathing, an action that can go undetected for days. This is until we realize we need oxygen and then we begin to take control of our own breathing patterns. This ends up complicating things, and luckily, we revert to our normal involuntary breathing patterns. If I just made you think about your own breathing patterns, sorry about that, but at least you'll forget it about the end of this video, probably. By breathing, we are also capable of smelling. You've done it before, whether it was the new perfume you decided to purchase or the stench radiated from the spoiled milk sitting in the corner of your fridge. Most of us have experienced many smells by this point in our lives. The importance of smell has even been monetized. Companies mass produce air fresheners that we all place in our homes and cars. Even when looking at the thumbnail for this video, I'm sure you teared up a bit. Now, that would be impossible, but it's likely you at least thought of the smell emitted by onions. While on the topic, why exactly does smelling chopped onions make a person cry? Well, we have glands all over our bodies. These structures are responsible for secreting certain substances. One type of gland, in particular, the lacrimal glands, which are also known as tear glands, are situated on the top of our eyes. These glands are responsible for releasing tear fluid. Typically, this fluid lubricates our eyes every time we blink, but these glands release a greater amount of fluid when we cry. Our body needs a mechanism for getting rid of all this excess tear fluid production. This is accomplished by another structure known as the tear duct or the nasolacrimal duct. The tear duct acts as a passageway for excess tear fluid to be drained via the nose. This is why we may have a runny nose when we cry. Now, in the case of onions, they release Lachrymatory-factor synthase into the air. This enzyme turns sulfoxide amino acids in the onion into sulfenic acid. Sulfenic acid is unstable, so the structure will rearrange into Syn-propanethiol-s-oxide. Syn-propanethiol-s-oxide is responsible for irritating lacrimal glands when it becomes abundant in the air. This irritation then causes our lacrimal glands to produce excess tears. But how is this all possible in the first place? How do we smell? Well, let me rephrase the question. I'm sure we smell just fine, but what I mean to ask is, how does the process of smelling work? Well, we have what are known as olfactory bulbs, situated below our brains, but above the levels of the brainstem and cerebellum. Olfactory sensory organs are under these nerves, and they communicate with them. Now, molecules are released by the objects around us. These molecules are freely moving in the air and eventually enter our nostrils once we inhale. Once they enter, they stimulate odor receptors in the sensory neurons. Each neuron has one odor receptor. Molecules will stimulate different receptors to create a unique smell. The sensory neurons communicate the stimuli from the odor receptors in the form of electrical impulses to the olfactory bulbs in the brain. We have two olfactory bulbs, and these nerves are responsible for transmitting sensory information to the piriform cortex, a structure that consists of several neurons behind the olfactory bulbs. Olfactory stimuli can also be relayed to the thalamus. This structure is responsible for making sense of sensory information from all our sensory organs. Without even realizing it, we become accustomed to a smell after inhaling much of its molecules. This is the result of evolution. Our nervous system experiences a decline in sensitivity if the same stimulus ensues for a long period of time. This subtle change in what we smell actually protects our species. We are able to detect new smells because we become accustomed to the ones that are constantly in our environments. This is important because if a smell is detrimental to our health, then we can pick up on it right away. Say you forgot to turn off the stove and you smell smoke coming from the kitchen. There are other smells in the home that can block your brain from picking up on the smoke, but your body has been accustomed to those smells and now detects a threat. This shift in smell then allows you to realize that your stove was on and now you can prevent the situation from worsening. In a way, this can be thought of as olfactory memory. We become accustomed to a certain smell after constantly being exposed to it. Take your home, for example. You notice no difference in the smell quality at your house, even when leaving and coming back. But this is not the same experience for the guests you bring over. They associate your home with a unique smell that you have become accustomed to. Not only are smells unique, but they influence the taste of foods as well. Our olfactory and gustatory systems are more intertwined than we think. When explaining how smell works, I outlined the first pathway. A second pathway exists that is also responsible for what we smell. This second route consists of the foods we consume. You see, our nasal area is connected to our mouths via the pharynx. This channel allows molecules from the food to travel to our olfactory sensory neurons. These neurons are then stimulated and result in the aroma we are familiar with. Now, there are times when the second pathway is not a viable option. If you guessed that this would be when one is experiencing nasal congestion, then you would be correct. A stuffy nose is what results when tissue and blood vessels in our nasal passageways become inflamed. Inflammation can be the result of too much fluid occupying the space in these compartments, which is often the case for those who are sick. Other reasons for inflammation can be less severe, like the presence of irritants from tobacco smoke, or more extreme, like a tumor blocking the specific area. Nasal congestion hinders molecules from reaching olfactory sensory organs via the secondary pathway. This is why we can lose the ability to taste when sick. Of course, this can result from infection of the sensory neurons as well. Smell accounts for 80% of the tastes experienced when having a meal. Without the ability to smell, food becomes bland, and we become disinterested in eating foods solely for the taste. Clearly, smell has a strong influence on what it is we taste, but can the same be said about its correlation to memory? We've all been there. Years have passed since we experienced a certain smell, and its return propagates a flood of feelings and memories. Maybe you just moved away from home. Now you are returning for Thanksgiving. Upon your arrival, the aroma escaping the kitchen from your mother's cooking elicits a strong response that reminds you of times when you were younger. The smell alone took you to a different time filled with potent, nostalgic feelings. How exactly does a smell cause this response to occur? This may be due to the anatomy of our brains. Our brains have a collection of structures that form the limbic system. This system is one of the many responsible for our emotions, how we behave, and most importantly, memories. Two of the most crucial structures for memory processing are the amygdala and hippocampus. The amygdala links emotional responses with memories. Because of this structure, certain emotions return to an individual when they think of a certain memory. Additionally, the amygdala also plays a role in the formation of new fearful memories. Now, every time you can't sleep because an image from a scary movie is ingrained into your head, you know what part of your brain to think. Unlike the amygdala, the hippocampus is where memories from our experiences are formed and are assigned to long-term storage. This structure also plays a role in the association between memories and the senses. As you can see from the image, the amygdala and hippocampus are located in both temporal lobes of the brain, and as you can tell, this region is above the brainstem and cerebellum. Does this location sound similar? Well, it is. If you remember, this is the space similar to the area where the olfactory bulbs are. The amygdala and hippocampus are right above the olfactory tracts that lead to the olfactory bulbs. The close proximity of these structures allow for olfactory signals to be rapidly relayed to the limbic system. Neurogenesis, the process by which new neurons develop, occurs in the hippocampus. New neural connections account for newly formed memories from learning or experiences. Some neurons in the limbic system can cause the formation of associate memories. These are the types of memories that are triggered by a specific sense. Typically, the stronger an emotion is that accompanies a smell and a memory, the more potent the feeling when the memory is triggered by the smell. What's interesting is that our ability to smell is limited by our genetics. Anosmia is regarded as the partial or complete loss of the ability to smell. This can be caused by temporary factors such as a cold or flu, but the condition can also be permanent. Congenital anosmia is an instance where the condition would be permanent and result from one's makeup. No, not that type of makeup. Their genetic makeup. In this case, people are born without the ability to smell. When a condition is described as being congenital, this means it arises from birth. This one specifically depends on autosomal dominant inheritance, meaning that the disorder-causing gene is present in all chromosomes except the sex chromosomes. Moreover, only one copy of the gene is necessary for the condition to be expressed. Individuals with anosmia are incapable of detecting pleasant smells like the aroma of vanilla, but even more importantly, they are unable to detect toxins in the air. People affected by anosmia also have a reduced sense of taste. Luckily, the ability to taste remains, but much of the strength of a food's flavor is greatly reduced. Taste is a sense that resists change to a greater extent than smell. Nerves are also responsible for translating different tastes. However, no other sense activates the brain to the same extent as smell. This is why smell is the most sensitive sense when it comes to damage. Anosmia is not the only explanation for why some individuals are incapable of detecting a smell. Certain gene variations exist that prevent individuals from experiencing a certain smell. Carpenter ants are a species of ants found in Australia and in the United States. These insects spray unsuspecting victims with formic acid as a means of self-defense. Poignant smells may also result from the death of an ant. Odorous house ants are the most common ones found in the East Coast and Midwest homes. They are said to emit a smell similar to that of blue cheese when they are squished. Some individuals are incapable of detecting these smells because of their genetic makeup. In the case of carpenter ants, formic acid is said to have a smell similar to that of vinegar. Some people have a distinct idea of the smell emitted by ants based on their prior experience, but others are completely clueless on what the smell may be. We must also account for the fact that we experience smells to different degrees, so some people may be more sensitive to the blue cheese or formic acid scents from the ants. Apart from ants, another common example is cyanide. This is a more extreme case as long-term exposure to cyanide gas can cause physiological changes that make its presence detectable. However, cyanogen chloride, for example, is a colorless gas, and the one shown on the screen here is hydrogen cyanide. Many other forms of colorless cyanide gases exist as well. One would be unable to confirm the presence of such a gas unless they experience physiological changes or its distinct odor. Cyanide is said to have a bitter almond smell. Most of the general population has the genetic trait to notice the smell. Only about 20 to 40% of individuals are incapable of detecting the bitter almond smell. With all this in mind, what's the importance of having the ability to smell certain compounds? Well, for one, it could liven the flavor of one's meal. Certain foods also have undetectable scents to a portion of the population, like asparagus. The more serious implications revolve around life or death matters. Inhaling cyanide gas for extended periods of time can cause irreversible damage. Furthermore, it can lead to death if the smell and associated symptoms go undetected. There have been cases where detecting these lethal smells has saved lives. Angel of death is a term used to describe a criminal who holds a caregiving position and uses it to kill others. The cause of these deaths can go undetected for some time, as healthcare professionals are expected to have a patient's best interest in mind. Nevertheless, angels of death have existed in the past. One, in specific, was Donald Harvey. Harvey was a nurse aide at Cincinnati and London, Kentucky hospitals. He is estimated to be responsible for the death of 87 individuals, but a more accurate report is more likely to be between 37 to 57 patients. After all, he did plead guilty to the death of 37 patients, but there can be more casualties. While at these hospitals, Harvey often attended to terminally ill patients. Harvey would kill unsuspecting victims by using arsenic, rat poison, and cyanide. Terminally ill individuals were not the only ones subjected to his crimes. Harvey also allegedly poisoned his roommate and lover, Carl Hawiller, with arsenic. His reasoning for doing so was said to be that he believed Hawiller was being an unfaithful partner. Moreover, Harvey pictured himself as an angel for controlling the fate of the terminally ill. It was not until a medical examiner conducted an autopsy on one of Harvey's unsuspecting victims that the killer's crimes would be revealed. The medical examiner smelled a distinct odor of cyanide that resulted as a trace of cyanide poisoning. Typically, Harvey would conduct these crimes by adding arsenic, rat poison, or cyanide into a patient's food. If the examiner would have been unable to notice such a smell, multiple other individuals would have fallen victim to Harvey's crimes. These crimes had already taken a span of about 17 years. They are believed to have begun in 1970 and concluded by 1987. Who knew the ability to discern between smells would have the potential to save lives? After watching this entire video, I'm sure you've forgotten how in the beginning I made you think about your own breathing patterns. Well, I just reminded you, and it seems like you'll have to rewatch the video to forget once again.